This is a classic in the world of zombie TV series. Just 1 month after the virus outbreak, zombies have become the dominant force in the world. With no rule of law and moral constraints, surviving humans begin to distrust and fight each other for resources. How far will the Madison family go as ordinary people? Let's delve into Season 3 of Fear the Walking Dead. Last season, Nick led his community to join the military, only to be greeted by a massacre of soldiers. Nick and the injured Luciana were captured. Madison followed clues to a refugee camp to find Nick but was unexpectedly taken by these soldiers. They were taken to this so-called refugee camp, which exuded an eerie atmosphere. The entrance was littered with human body parts. After arriving at the military base, Travis was taken away separately. Travis was brought to a dimly lit factory where screams and gunshots could be heard at any time. Then Travis was locked in a room where many others like him were also imprisoned, and he unexpectedly saw Nick. Nick also opened his eyes and saw Travis. However, they dared not make a sound to avoid attracting attention and being taken away. Beautiful women always receive special treatment. Madison and Alicia were taken to an office, and a handsome guy brought them coffee. The man was named Troy. Madison said, "We haven't attacked you. We're just here to find my son." Troy replied, "We're not the bad guys. We just need to conduct a little examination, and then I'll give you supplies to leave." Madison has been through too much since the end of the world to believe Troy. The truth was exactly what Madison expected. This Troy was a leader, and he was studying the process of turning the living into zombies. In reality, he enjoyed the feeling of controlling life and death. People imprisoned here were taken away every day for experiments, and those captured were practically waiting for death to come. At this point, the man next to Travis said, "I have a way to escape, but I need a strong person to help me." The man's name was Steven. Steven knew that the base's sewer pipes could lead to the outside. Soon after, the men were taken away to be prepared for the experiment. The people here were tied to the pipes and shot. Next, they would wait to turn into zombies. After a while, the two people next to Nick were taken away.
But those anomalies are exceptions that prove.
If they didn't do something soon, Nick would be next. Travis deliberately talked to them. "What's the point of what you're doing? You're just slaughtering unarmed civilians." Travis intentionally provoked the two soldiers because the two people who had just been killed were about to turn into zombies. Travis volunteered to take Nick's place for the experiment. Naturally, the two soldiers became interested as they had never seen someone willingly sacrifice themselves. Just as they were untying Travis's hands, Travis fought back. Nick and Steven rushed from behind, pushing one of the soldiers into the arms of the zombie. The four of them seized the opportunity and quickly escaped. However, more soldiers outside started chasing them. To cover Nick and the others' escape, Travis stayed behind. Steven tried to open a manhole cover to go down but was grabbed by Nick, who let Luciana go first. Just as Nick had gone down into the sewer, Steven was killed. The soldiers didn't chase after Nick but threw Steven's body down and sealed the manhole cover. When Troy learns that his men are dead, he doesn't allow Travis to return to the lab because it's such a cheap shot. Troy had Travis taken to an even more brutal place. The soldiers threw Travis down and wanted to see how he would survive there. Travis was physically strong, and although it was perilous at times, he managed to kill all the zombies. Outside, Willie was also somewhat shocked, and then he released even more zombies. Nick, who had escaped with Luciana through the sewer, made their way all the way to the end. Nick tried to kick open a metal door, but the sight outside was hair-raising, so they could only retreat. A large number of zombies were right behind them. Nick didn't expect to encounter the zombified Steven on the way back, and Steven lunged at Nick. Meanwhile, Troy returned to the office only to find Madison and Alicia had disappeared without a trace. Madison suddenly attacked Troy from behind, but Troy was incredibly strong, easily thwarting Madison's assault and knocking the knife out of her hand. Alicia hurriedly tried to retrieve the knife but was pushed back by Troy. Madison locked her arms around Troy's neck from behind. In this desperate moment, Madison found a spoon and swiftly jammed it into Troy's eye socket. Now Troy was firmly in her grasp. As long as Madison applied pressure, Troy's eye was doomed. Madison instructed Alicia to go find a vehicle, and with Troy as her hostage, she set out to locate Travis. While Alicia was searching for car keys, she heard noises from the sewer and rushed in, only to find her brother Nick. At that moment, the zombie was on top of Nick. In a dire situation, Alicia tossed her knife down. Luciana, despite her injuries, picked up the knife and dispatched the zombies. But right after, two soldiers appeared behind Alicia. Simultaneously, Madison was surrounded by soldiers. Troy told her, "Your man is already dead." Madison was visibly agitated at this point.
Please, let my brother go.
Jack! Jack, get off me! Get a goddamn off me!
Where's my family?
Please, I know my brother well enough.
Where's my family?
I don't know.
Where are they?
I don't know. I know my brother well enough to know he brought this on himself.
Jack!
I know that. Just.
I just want my family back.
Okay, all right, okay. If you let him go, I'll get you what you need. I will find your family.
Then Troy's brother showed up, which helped calm Madison down. It turned out that all the soldiers here were under the command of the two brothers, with Troy being the more twisted one. Troy revealed the location of Travis. They quickly arrived at the pit to search for Travis. Travis was covered in blood but unharmed. Upon seeing Troy, Travis wanted to kill him.
I found Nick. He's here.
Mom! Oh my God.
Madison finally saw Nick again, in the apocalypse. As a mother, she never stopped worrying about her children. Travis seemed somewhat awkward as a stepfather at this moment. Jake didn't give them a hard time and provided medical treatment for Luciana. He invited them to evacuate with him. Jake's father owned a farm in Mexico, where the people were kind-hearted. But Madison no longer trusted these people due to Troy's previous actions. But during the evacuation, Willie was about to retreat from the lab, and he missed the days of experimentation. At that moment, he suddenly heard a noise coming from inside the wall, and Willie's curiosity got the better of him and he had to pry it open to see what was going on. Just as Willie thought it was just a rat, a zombie inside grabbed him. The zombies also started to come out towards the military base. In just a few minutes, the base was overrun by zombies. Madison fought off zombies to cover everyone's retreat. Travis had no choice but to take Alicia and Luciana on Jake's helicopter for evacuation. Nick was helping his mother fight off zombies, and soon they were surrounded. Just then, gunshots rang out, and Troy came to the rescue. There were simply too many zombies, so Madison and Nick had to leave in a car, once again splitting up the family. However, their destination was Troy's father's farm. Oddly, Troy didn't appear to hold any grudges. The convoy and the airplane quickly exited the military base, heading towards Jake's father's farm. Travis looked despondent on the plane, perhaps missing his son. Perhaps he felt that his life had lost its direction, and now he just hoped to reunite with Madison at the farm. But without warning, the unexpected occurred. The plane was flying through the night sky, only about 20 minutes away from the farm, when it suddenly shook, and several bullet holes appeared. They knew they were under attack from the ground. Travis was unfortunate to be shot in the neck. Fearful of turning into a zombie and endangering Alicia and the others, he opened the plane's cargo door and fell out while he was still conscious. Soon, Travis disappeared into the night. They say Travis was a saint, but he did it all for his family, even Madison's family, who were not related to him. The plane crash-landed in a valley due to the malfunction. Alicia still held onto a glimmer of hope that Travis might still be alive. She couldn't fathom why someone would attack them without reason. In contrast, Madison and the others in the car had a smooth journey to reach the farm. They never expected that Travis and the others hadn't arrived yet, and Madison couldn't help but worry. As they looked at the farm with its vast fields and armed patrols, they couldn't help but think it was an ideal refuge. Before long, an elderly man approached them and struck up a conversation with Madison. It turned out he was Jeremiah, Troy and Jake's father and the owner of the farm. He warmly welcomed Madison and her son. To Jeremiah's surprise, Madison and Nick's face didn't have the same look of gratitude that others had when they came here. Jeremiah didn't know what his son had done at the border. Jeremiah found them a place to stay. However, Nick couldn't trust the people here. He couldn't forget how the people from the community had been killed. The next day, Jake and Alicia finally arrived at the farm on foot. Madison was overjoyed to see her daughter, but she soon realized that Travis hadn't returned. Madison felt like her emotional support had crumbled. Luciana, severely injured, had fallen unconscious, and the doctor warned that she might not make it. Troy said that Luciana might mutate if he took her in, and said that he was ready to kill Luciana with his pistol. Nick says, "Let me see her off myself." Then Nick took the gun from Troy's hand and aimed it back at him. Tensions escalated between the two sides. Eventually, Jeremiah persuaded them to allow Luciana inside for treatment but made Nick promise that he would ensure Luciana wouldn't harm anyone after turning into a zombie. Luciana was then taken to the medical room for treatment. Meanwhile, Madison sought solitude. She concealed her grief and silently vowed to eliminate any threats and protect Nick and Alicia. Madison will put away her weakness just so she can keep her children alive. The only comforting news was that Luciana's condition gradually improved. Alicia, unable to contain her emotions any longer, burst into tears in her brother's arms. She had watched her stepfather sacrifice himself in front of her, and Alicia had been trying to conceal her grief. The siblings had initially wanted to comfort their mother, but Madison had already steeled herself against the sorrow. Having lost her husband, Madison didn't wallow in despair. Instead, she became more determined to survive on the farm and gain control of it. However, due to the death of the helicopter pilot, the people on the farm blamed Madison's family for everything, and they faced constant exclusion. Madison, however, refused to back down and insisted, "My husband was a victim too. What we need to do now is find the person who attacked the plane." But the others were not quick to forgive. Even while waiting in line for food, they criticized Madison's family, calling them freeloaders. This only strengthened Madison's determination to stay. When a dangerous mission came up, Madison volunteered without hesitation. Troy couldn't stand the presence of Nick and Luciana. Madison directly approached Jeremiah, threatening to reveal Troy's experiments on live subjects if anything happened to her family. During this conversation, Madison also learned about the community's origins. It turns out Jeremiah was a blogger before the end times. He sold stuff on how to cope with the end of the world, and he also stocked up on a lot of supplies, which were enough to last them a long time, and plenty of guns and ammo. He hadn't anticipated the apocalypse to actually happen. This place quickly became a survival community. Alicia wasn't the same innocent girl anymore. Her experiences outside had made her mature. Alicia actively participated in cultural activities organized by the young people, which sounded good but actually served as a place for them to indulge in drugs and even use zombie heads for entertainment. Alicia realized that these people had been hiding under protection since the apocalypse and had no idea of the horrors of the outside world. She had to pretend to be happy to fit into this community. Nick, who initially wanted to leave, saw how hard his mother and sister were trying to integrate, and he began to change his mind. Luciana's condition also gradually improved. One night, the young people from the farm went out for a hunt. Nick pounced on Troy from the darkness and aimed a gun at his neck. Troy's character has always been a bit of a psychopath, and he was analyzing how long it would take for him to turn into a zombie. Nick, naturally, wants to avenge his community, but chooses to do what's best for his family. Nick laughs maniacally and rips up Troy's research notes. Instead of going berserk, Troy admires Nick and asks him to be his friend. Only perverts understand the world of perverts. Travis went offline in a hurry. What about Victor, who was at the hotel? This man was thrown off the dam just for stealing a bit of water, and Victor was terrified, negotiating with the boss out of fear that he might be next. Originally, Victor had been living a comfortable life in the hotel, but as more survivors arrived after Madison and her group left, tensions rose. They heard that there was a doctor in the hotel. The crowd even detained Hector and Elena, and to calm them down, Victor had to claim that he was a doctor who could treat everyone's medical needs. This temporarily pacified the crowd. However, trouble was on the horizon. While Victor could handle minor injuries, there was a pregnant woman in the group who went into labor. Victor can only say that he is not a gynecologist.
Maybe we let nature take its course.
And if the baby's breached with it and the mother dies,
How can you tell?
you must reach inside her.
Okay, that's not gonna happen.
Looking at the woman's irritable husband, Victor can only be tough to do it. Fortunately, he managed to help her give birth successfully, but Elena wants Victor to leave because more and more people are coming. Victor seemed to have expected this outcome. Before leaving, Hector asked him to see one more person, the same woman who had stabbed Victor earlier. She was mentally unstable and, upon Victor pointing to his abdomen, suddenly realized her actions and began apologizing profusely. She understood that her daughter had succumbed to the virus, and Victor had, in a way, granted her release. After Victor consoled her, she gave him a gift, originally intended for her daughter's wedding. As Victor froze, the woman jumped out the window, which was probably a relief for her as well. When Victor arrived at the hotel's garage, he opened the gift and found a high-end sports car. That's what fits who Victor was before the end of the world. Victor drove all the way to a reservoir. The fresh water resources here are strictly controlled, and the survivors in the neighborhood can only exchange their supplies for a small amount of fresh water. Victor came here to find a friend. The boss of this place is Dante. He had business dealings with Victor before the end of the world. Dante's sense of smell as a businessman allowed him to take over this reservoir at the first opportunity. However, Victor is now worthless, so Dante took him to the reservoir building. Victor also witnesses what happens to a water thief. and this is Dante's way of showing him how it's done. Dante knew Victor's greedy nature and believed that he might eventually try to seize control of the water supply. He intended to throw Victor off the building as a warning.
Did you truly think that we were friends in the old world?
At Victor's repeated entreaties, expressed his willingness to serve Dante and advise him. It was only through this that Victor managed to save his life. However, Victor was also imprisoned in a dungeon. That day a figure brought Victor a jug of water, and Victor gulped it down to quench his thirst. When he turned to look, he couldn't believe what he saw.
I knew you would drink it all. I told you I'd be your guardian angel.